Welcome back, guys. I feel like talking about a television show this week, so I'm going to talk about the new era of Doctor Who, where we got the 15th Doctor, who was our first gay and black and somewhat gendery, sometimes, Doctor. Yeah, he generally is, I believe, generally addressed as cis and he, him, and so on, but also wears a variety of outfits that play around with that a little bit. This is the era of Doctor Who where we are grappling on some level with the idea of the Doctor being non-binary on some level, and that's sometimes text and it's sometimes not, because the previous Doctor was a woman and all the previous ones before then were men, except for the one that they retconned in, because technically there has been another black Doctor who was also a woman first chronologically, but they just kind of throw her in there for one episode as like a retcon and then sometimes address it a little bit. But that felt like a cheap, weird little moment to just try to, like, I don't know, like, you could say that it's trying to pacify the chuds on some level and be like, try to make it more canon and not a weird one-off and make it technically make sense on some level. But on the other hand, it just feels like trying to get retroactive credit in a way that was like very akin to how J.K. Rowling would talk about her books in the years after she finished writing them. She would just kind of like retroactively insert diversity for points that she didn't have to do the actual work of, presenting in her actual story, which is just kind of cheating. So I started watching Doctor Who during the Matt Smith era. I did start from the very beginning of the new Who era. So basically, I was having to use a DVR back then because streaming wasn't that popular or even fully there yet, as far as I know. I don't know if you could stream Doctor Who online when the revival started. But basically, I would be DVRing the episodes, and so I'd be watching all of the Christopher Eccleston and David Tennant eras, and in between those, I'd get to the part with the commercial where you have to fast forward through the commercials, and that would always have, like, Matt Smith going, like, Stetsons are cool. So it was that season. That's the year I started watching Doctor Who, was when the Stetsons are cool commercials were airing. Then eventually got caught up, watched all of what was out so far for Matt Smith, then had to wait for it to come out in real time, and then have continued to watch Doctor Who ever since. I'm not like a mega ultra super fan. I'm not obsessive. I don't rewatch stuff over and over again. There are some episodes I've watched many times, but I do not rewatch entire seasons. Usually, I probably should some point, but it's like, one of those long-term goals, like watching all of Star Trek and stuff like that, where you're like, it's a commitment. I have other missions in life I'm trying to commit to. But to set the stage a little bit for what was going on at the time of this show, David Tennant was the Doctor for seasons 2 through 4, and then Russell T Davies left the show. He was the showrunner for the first 4 seasons of the show, and then Stephen Moffat took over for the next, like, I don't know, like 8 seasons or something. It was a very long era of Stephen Moffat overseeing, like, I guess it was ultimately just 2 doctors for the most part. It was just Matt Smith and Peter Capaldi, which throughout all this era, it's like, it's a good show. When I binged the show at the beginning, there was a period of time where I would say that Doctor Who was my favorite show. And sometime across Matt Smith and Peter Capaldi, I kind of stopped feeling that, but it was still a pretty good show often enough. Like, I am game for an anthology. I'm ready to watch a really inconsistent show where that throws a different idea at you every episode, and it might suck and it might be great. And then you kind of like remember the episodes that really stick with you, and you watch those ones over and over again. Over recent years, I've even been hanging out with people every now and then, showing them Doctor Who, and I'll just pick out a specific episode that I think kind of stands well on its own, and just let them deal with the drama of that anthology bit. And some of those have been from this new era, and like that can be a fun time. You don't have to love all of the show at once, and it doesn't really cohere all that much anyway. Unfortunately, when so people are getting pretty tired of Stephen Moffat's era, and there's a lot of reasons for that we cannot get into. This is such a huge topic. All of Doctor Who is such a huge show with so much conversation around it all the time. But then he got replaced by Chris Chibnall, who, as far as I'm aware, was basically known for writing a handful of Doctor Who episodes that no one really remembers, and some of Torchwood, and some of that's bits of Torchwood that are not well received. Torchwood being a spin-off show during the early era of this reboot of Doctor Who, or revival of Doctor Who. So that was a bit worrying, but we'd see how it goes. And he was going to be overseeing the first female Doctor, and that was like, you always want that to be good. I'm always cool with when people are when this kind of stuff is happening. Like, it's like, I always think back to like the Ghostbusters reboot and all the massive controversy surrounding that. And I was like, I'm cool with female Ghostbusters. They're just not the same characters, they're not supposed to be the same characters. So it's just going to be some other people doing some ghost busting as a sequel. Cause like the existing roster is the existing actors. I think at that point, some of them, at least one of them, was dead. And it was also just so far back that like, I don't want a sad return, but also I'm not a super fan of Ghostbusters, so I'm like, sure, new Ghostbusters, maybe. Have not even bothered watching the newest ones. No opinion on those. I just don't want to. I don't care. But yeah, the Doctor is an alien creature that reforms over and over again into different people. At one point, they were weirdly stingy enough about it that they like made David Tennant do an English accent, even though he's Scottish. But then by the time they got to Peter Capaldi, they let him just keep his Scottish accent 2 Doctors later. And it's like, increasingly you're just like, why, if this alien always transforms, but seems to always transform into the appearance of a human being or whatever, why is it always a white guy? White and guy. Like, that's the 2 parts of the question. Why is it always, like, because we specifically know that he changes personality. There are unifying elements of the Doctor, which, like, there's a mess to talk about, and I'm not going to be messy about this, but I'll refer to their current pronouns as each Doctor. So it's he for most of them, and then she for Doctor 13? 14? I think it was 13. And sometimes when I refer to the Doctor as a concept, I'll refer to them as they, but none of this graphs like cleanly under language, and so it's just, bear with me a bit about even how to address this, because it's not the same thing as a human non-binary person exactly. But the Doctor regenerates into a completely different person, and they have a new personality and new mannerisms and a new outfit and new friends and new storylines. So it's a show that continually reinvents itself. And so given that framework, and being this many Doctors deep, 12 Doctors deep, including some retconned, backfilled characters like the War Doctor and the previous generations of Doctors that precede the first one, or something, if that's what was going on with that canon. It's a mess. I don't like thinking about Doctor Who canon that much. I'm totally just up for the anthology. I do not want to obsess over the long-term canon. I don't care about Gallifrey unless the story is about Gallifrey. There was no reason for him never to generate into a woman or to generate into other ethnicities and so on. I thought about this for a while because I was curious, because I was thinking about, like, there is some messiness there. Particularly, I was chatting with somebody years ago about this, because I was like, for example, what would happen if the Doctor regenerated into an indigenous culture? What does that mean? I'm like, at that point, I'm like, the show needs to be showrun by somebody that has insight there, because that does feel like it could get really messy really quickly if the Doctor regenerates into a particular kind of person. They are still at the root of themselves like an alien from another planet that's infinitely powerful, and the showrunners and writers are largely usually just white Englishmen and so on. So it's like, how would you handle that? That does seem like there are certain things that if the Doctor transformed into certain things, that would be very difficult to do right. And by which I mean, like, do right by the people. And how do you even address like the cultural context, the historical context of those people, because the Doctor would be like kind of a weird pretender. There's like a weird thing to unpack there about race swapping and so on with the Doctor, in a way that I think is much more complicated to unpack than the Doctor switching genders around and so on. They're all complicated in different ways. Particularly because I'm like, if the Doctor becomes a woman for a lifetime, then the Doctor's a woman. I don't think that's that, like, you can unpack some of the weirdness of how they change and stuff like that, and that's interesting. That could be really interesting to talk about. But like, I don't think it's that hard to accept the idea that the Doctor is a woman for a lifetime, and then that, for all intents and purposes, that's just womanhood, and that's just, you know, everything that comes with that. But certain races, I do wonder, given the culture of the specific people here on Earth, and also like what they've gone through as a people, and also what their relationship might be with the UK and, you know, an imperial force, colonialism and whatnot. I don't know how you unpack some of those options there. So that's for a future writer to gracefully handle or completely just shit the bed on. No idea. But we get this era with Chris Chibnall running, and we have the first female Doctor, and unfortunately, this is the worst bit of Doctor Who I've ever seen, and that's deeply unfortunate, because then you're always like, hear me out. I'm not dumping on this season because I'm not one of the chuds that's being weird about the female Doctor. She's great. Every actor that plays Doctor Who is great, and every actor that plays companions are pretty great. There are some high water marks, but like, no one really fucks up as an actor. They do great jobs at casting people for the show, so they're all fun. They're just given really weird material, and the Peter Capaldi era was really rough to watch. There was way too many companions, so the Doctor was just kind of like one among many characters, and you could really tell that it was a show being run by a dude, and that because, like, one, they did the classic thing of being like, oh, well, we wrote it so like the gender doesn't even really matter and stuff like that, which is like, in certain really specific contexts, is kind of interesting and feminist and so on. Like, if you get to like Alien and whatnot with Ripley, although over the course of Alien, I always find that curious. Like, the claim is that Alien was written for a male character, and then Ripley replaced the male, was like that Sigourney Weaver was cast. I think that's supposed to be the narrative about Alien. They must have shifted some stuff a bit, because the theming of that is so specifically interesting because it's Ripley, and it wouldn't work the same way. But then again, a lot of fiction, we you know, we were doing a selection bias when we look backwards through the best stuff like Alien. It's the best stuff because it came out that way. If it could have just not come out that way, and then it wouldn't be the best stuff. So it's like, it's not that, I guess it's not that unbelievable that this or that thing happened, because you can accidentally make the best stuff. Some of the later stuff made by the same director being pretty not great further suggests that even the greats making great stuff is sometimes a bit of an accident or a confluence of the perfect elements and other people in the room that don't get the credit and so on. That we're getting a bit off topic there, but the Doctor Who was deeply uninterested in the fact that the Doctor was a woman now, and was just kind of rolling with it, which isn't the worst thing ever based on how it could be handled, but I don't think that's really the show we got. Instead, we got a show where it seemed like the people running it weren't that comfortable writing the protagonist of the series anymore because she was a woman. And what really stood out to me is that we had I kind of call it like the Magic School Bus era, because she's kind of like there as like being like Miss Frizzle. She's like the kooky, crazy teacher character that's going to take us through history, which was the origins of Doctor Who, was the essentially Magic School Bus type of ideas. Like, we're going to go to different parts of history and teach history to kids, basically, was kind of the premise, if I understand from like 50 plus years ago. But it really felt like it here, to the point where it felt like we were here to mostly watch the companions, and the Doctor was kind of just also there to solve the problems. but we have specifically this like whole mixed group where we have an Indian woman, and we have a black man, and we have an old white man as the three companions. And the trying to remember, the black guy was the son of the white guy, but it was like I think it was married into family, and so like they had that bond, but not the blood or something like that, because the wife dies in the pilot, because there was originally 4 characters. And like one of the best episodes of this era that I remember kind of reacting to was like when Grant is confronted with the specter of his dead wife for a bit, and that was like, I remember that hitting me a bit. But overall, this era, these characters get almost as much spotlight as the Doctor, or more. The Doctor kind of doesn't have a lot of texture to her. She's kind of uninteresting, and particularly they give Grant, the white guy, the old white man, who's written by an old white man, all of the best lines. Like, he is just the most charming character. He's the most funny character. He's got the most interesting reactions to things. The other 2 companions are mostly fade into the background unless the episode's about them specifically, basically. And it's just like, there's parts of that era where I felt like Grant was the Doctor, essentially. And it was just a very weird show to have to sit through for that era. As far as this entire era goes, I want to say that like the Demons of Punjab might be the only good episode. I might be misremembering the name of it exactly, but like it's the episode that takes place in historical India. The rest of the entire run for this Doctor is just extremely forgettable, not very interesting. You already have the 4 main characters being a lot of companions at once, but then every episode would take us to a place with like 10 new characters that all get thrown all at us rapidly, and it's just very disorienting. It also has very weird morality. Like, this is when it gets really apparent how weird the morality can be. This is not unique to this era. Like, most people probably remember like the anti-abortion episode of Peter Capaldi's era, where the moon turns out to be an egg for a baby, and it's just full of just a lot of pro-choice rhetoric. Pro-life rhetoric. That's like anti-abortion and so on. And that's a lot to unpack. Like Sarah Zed did an episode about that. That's worth looking into. That's just like a interesting dissection of that whole mess. But like, there's always been some weird politics here and there in Doctor Who. But this is the era where like you have the Doctor arguing that it's best to let giant spiders suffer and die from growing too large instead of euthanizing them. And it's like, I don't even know what the best answer to give the Doctor for the Doctor to give there would be, but like you wrote the scenario, and like, why'd you put the Doctor in that particular scenario? Like, they have a Trump type villain, and he's the bad guy for shooting spiders, and it's like, this won't age well in some of the other eras where the Doctor kind of shoots monsters, but it's also like, what is the morality here? And there was like a weird Amazon episode where the bad guy was the protester, essentially, because they made him a terrorist protester. Like, it's a late Marvel villain, the way that they kept having like Marvel villains, and then and Bane from The Dark Knight Rises be like the guy who's right but went too far type stuff. And it's like, these are weird. And then they had the Doctor reading Harry Potter in prison, and I'm like, why'd you do that? Why? Don't love that you did that, because it's like it was during the peak of J.K. Rowling's anti-trans stuff. Like, so they had to know, because I was watching these episodes while they were new, so like I had the feeling at the time, I'm like, why is she reading Harry Potter? Why would you do that? One, it makes her just seem kind of dumb, because out of all of literature, she's just like really into Harry Potter, a sort of anthology of fantasies that aren't extremely imaginative. Like, I liked Harry Potter growing up. I'm not gonna like dump on the books themselves that much, but it's like that's peak. That's what she would find to be a page turner when she's the Doctor and does all these crazy journeys all the time. I just don't know about that. But making a show of her reading Doctor Who is like, felt like a weird sign of solidarity with Rowling, and I'm like, I don't know if that feels either. But I'm not like dumping on the whole show for having some weird politics. It's mostly just that this was an era where plot lines were very unmemorable, frequently uninteresting, and often had a very confusing or unsatisfying conclusions. And then we hit Flux, and Flux was the worst season of Doctor Who I've ever seen individually. It was meant to be a full season of television with a unifying storyline instead of the way that's usually an anthology, which is partially true. It has a big bad villain, but it also is kind of a weird little anthology. It does just have a bunch of things where like, here's this episode's particular scenario with a particular monster and so on. So it kind of didn't do that. They brought in some, I think, who I assume is probably some British comedian as another companion after removing 2 of the previous ones. And like, he was pretty good. He was a lot of fun, but it's also like, once again, Doctor Who is clearly like the creator of the show, not the showrunner of the show, is clearly having the most comfort with the most familiar character and giving them all the best lines. Gotcha. Immediately recreates the same problem that Grant had, where this one guy has all the best dialogue all the time. They kind of are, if I remember, they're hinting that Yaz, the Indian woman, has an attraction to the Doctor. So like, oh, is this lesbians maybe, or one lesbian in one direction, or is it just like, you know, she just really respects her? It's like, what are they doing here? I don't remember if they ever clearly specified whether it was an actual attraction or if they were kind of queer baiting, mainly because it's impossible to remember this era of the show. It's just right out of the brain. The only thing I remember about this bit is that there was one episode that wanted to do a time loop, and they just like did not understand why time loops are even fun to do in an episode, because they were like breaking their own rules or not really creating the satisfaction that comes from like having the same thing happen over and over again and iterating on that and reacting to that and working with that and so on. And then other than that, it was just the fact that it felt like a season long finale. It felt like the entire season was a season finale of Doctor Who. And that's a problem, because season finales, as like a unifying rule, are like the worst part of Doctor Who. Almost every season has like a Bad Wolf style thing, like the crack in the wall, the snow, and so on. There's always like a looming mystery, and that looming mystery is always just like a Chekhov's gun. It's always just like, here's a weird detail that's kind of imaginative or memorable. It shows up once an episode or once every other episode, basically. Doesn't affect the plot usually. We're just like, huh, that's weird, and then we move on. And then it all is building up to being kind of answered in the finale, and the finale is like usually like, it's the fate of the entire universe, the earth is crumbling, the solar system's exploding, and this person's doing it, and then you like, the Doctor like waves his hand and solves the problem kind of effortlessly. Like it's always like a half an hour of building up stakes, and then at the end the Doctor just kind of like does some bullshit that I really can't really explain most of the time, and I guess it worked out. And I'm like, this wasn't very fun. This is not a fun structure. So having that level of threat for an entire season just makes things kind of annoying, because I'm like, okay, well, the threat is on an incomprehensible scale, so that means it's not interesting again. So the individual episodes had the chance of being kind of interesting because they're still kind of doing an anthology, but the looming threat that was overbearing at that point was just not good. And this was during COVID, so the episodes count got cut. So I think it went from like 8 episodes to like 6 episodes. So just all the more was just having more production problems, kind of falling apart. And so it was just like a very unfortunate moment where we're like, is this the chance we're gonna redeem the current Doctor? And then instead it became the worst season the show has had so far. And so just Doctor 13 never had good television, really. It's really unfortunate. Something goes on with Disney at this point, I think, because from this point on, the episodes start showing up on Disney Plus, and they start calling it season 1 and 2 even though it's not, it's clearly a continuation. It's very strange. But yeah, the show's gone for a few years, and then we get the reboot, where the sort of soft reboot with Disney that's just not a reboot. It's just more Doctor Who, but they're kind of acting like it's a reboot. I don't know what their goal here was. But we have, strangely, we bring back Russell T Davies, and most strangely, we bring back David Tennant, the 10th Doctor. David Tennant is the most popular, uncontroversial, beloved Doctor of this show, as far as I can tell. A lot of people like him. I like him. And Russell T Davies is the guy who ran the first 4 seasons, which was mostly David Tennant back then. So we bring back the previous showrunner from back when people people more universally seem to like the show, or it's like at least the era that people are nostalgic for at this point after like almost 20 years of this particular show going on. And it's very strange because this is not how the rules of how the Doctor works so far are. But this is actually just the table setting for Dr. 15, Ncuti Gatwa being the first gay doctor and so on. So this is 3 specials that it happened before the new season. And there's 3 episodes of David Tennant as the Doctor, and each one has a particular mission it's on for table setting for the new Doctor. The first episode is this episode where they specifically are rewinding back to season 4, which is fascinating. It's super weird. If I remember correctly, how many episodes were we in here? At the end of the 13th Doctor, we were 13 seasons in. So we are rewinding 9 seasons of television to the 4th season. Literally, the show is more than 3 times as long as it was when the season happened. And we're rewinding all the way back to that point. Just insane thing to do, honestly. It's kind of fascinating. It's crazy. They specifically bring back Donna from season 4. And Donna had a very sad ending where she had to forget all of her adventures with the Doctor, because if she ever remembered anything about what happened, it would basically, like, the Doctor, she absorbed the energy of the Doctor or something like that. It was kind of, it gets convoluted to explain, but she was going to die, so the Doctor was able to save her, but in doing so had to remove her memories of him altogether. So she just has to go back to her life, and her family at this point knows what happened. So they're all just like protecting her from memories of the fantastical. So they're just maintaining this mundane life around her to keep her safe, where she's just having just this suburban, polite little British life, and things are just going on normally. She has in the time since she is married. She has a trans daughter, and that's immediately interesting to introduce subtextually, because we're having the Doctor switch back and forth in gender also. So like, gender is on the table and it is being discussed. And what's immediately interesting about this is the fact that Russell T Davies is back in charge. Russell T Davies has done a number of shows about queer people. He also did he also introduced the character Jack Harkness, which is infamously what we named the Harkness scale after, which is like the question of whether or not it's ethical to have sex with various creatures in fiction. Is like you apply the Harkness test, which is basically like, it's like, I don't remember exactly. It's like basically like, are they the equivalent of intelligence of like a human adult or something, and can they like communicate consent or something like that? It's just it's silly, but it's like, it ranges from like, is it okay to have sex with aliens, is it okay to have sex with werewolves, to furries and so on. It's just like, it comes up in these goofy contexts that obviously are not applicable to real life, so who cares, but it comes up when people try to discourse this stuff. And it's called that because Jack Harkness is bisexual, pansexual. I think some people call him omnisexual, which is like a sci-fi concept that's also not applicable to things, I don't think. But he specifically even has an episode where he kisses Rose Tyler, the current companion, and then kisses the Doctor in the same scene, in the same way. So there was hints of queerness from the very beginning of the new Doctor Who, because that was in season 1. That's older than David Tennant. That's the first Doctor from the new era. So Russell T Davies was already inserting this stuff from the get-go, but it was more restrained. He wasn't giving us a queer doctor or a queer companion, as far as I'm aware, at any point. And queerness didn't come up that much, especially compared to his other shows that he ran in the meantime. But when he came back here, he came out just guns blazing, not only with the mission being to set up the new Doctor being gay, but also like giving us like the trans daughter for Donna, and like spending time with that. We have some very funny dialogue where the daughter points out that you're assuming the pronouns of this alien creature that we just met, and David Tennant's like, oh yes, you're right, I'm sorry about that, and you know, they try to hash that out, and like this dumb little muppet is like, it's like, my preferred way of being addressed is the definite article, I am always the meeps, or whatever. And it's like this goofy ass thing where you have to address this character as the meeps. Like, you don't say he or she or they, it's always that. That's how you grammatically like format the thing. And like, to everyone's credit, I think they roll with it. I'm not going to rewatch the episode to research it, but I think that everyone in the room continues to address that character as requested for the rest of the episode. No joking, no frustration, not even brought up as a topic. And that includes after the Meeps, if that's what their name was, is established to be a horrible nightmare monster villain that's like genociding people. So it's like, it really does just highlight just how straightforward and easy it is just to like respect basic identity stuff and then just move on with your life, and not like use that as a bludgeon. Like, it's not like a privilege that you like withdraw the moment that somebody sucks or whatever. Like, you don't weaponize that kind of stuff. It's just what someone is called, and that's it. Villains, heroes, who cares? I think that's how it goes, but I'm not entirely sure. But it's like, it's overall a fairly cute episode. It has a very particular strange resolution, though, which is that Donna's curse is ultimately basically lifted. She gets to remember what happened in her adventures with the Doctor and know everything about everything. And they activate the power of the Doctor that was within her from the previous season. And she essentially, they kind of like hand wave it a bit as being like, because she gave birth since then, the power has been diluted between her and her daughter, and they're able to like dispense of it safely at that point or something. But it's also like kind of indicated on a somewhat strange way that like it's because of their like certainty of their womanhood or something, which is affirming for the trans character, but is also like, just at some point you're like, what are we talking about as far as how this works mechanically? But it's also like going to be a bit of an indicator of how Russell T Davies is just a very old man, and he's writing this stuff about contemporary things, and is just going to blunder some of the stuff, because I recently rewatched this episode with Ka, our No Playing Games DM, and he burst out laughing so hard because it's just like a decades-long joke. It's like it's such a weird mess, is that when Donna was dying in season 4, her mind was overloading or whatever. She kept saying binary, 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 binary. And I cannot believe they turned this into a setup and a payoff all these years later, functionally. But I wish they hadn't, because it's just such a not great line of dialogue. They start saying binary again, binary, binary, and then they like look at the camera and say non-binary, like triumphantly. And it's not affirming. Like, it's not, on some level, this is a good thing. Like, the politics is good. How it's handling the character on some level is like it's not good in a quality way, I don't think, but it is good in a way that the word good means good outside of the context of qualitative judgments of like art quality. It's an insane line of dialogue. It is very hard to take seriously. It is not, it's just, it only works in the way it's that unique scenario of when someone so triumphantly says something that just seems really dumb. And you're like, I don't know how I live with this episode ending this way. Okay, but sure. So the first episode is largely reestablishing David Tennant and Donna, who are going to be our characters for these 3 episodes. For these specials. Donna's back, which is fun. I love Donna. Donna is my favorite companion, I think, in all of Doctor Who, actually. She's just fantastic. I love how she doesn't put up with the Doctor stuff. I like that she's abrasive with him. I like that she's older than all of the other companions by a significant margin, and it just like puts her in a different, like, she's in a different place in her life compared to these other people who are often like doe-eyed 20-year-olds that are like so enamored with the Doctor. It's like, she's in such a different place in life, and it's a very fun dynamic. So I love I love David Tennant with Donna, and it's sad that we only had 1 season. So having a bit more of this all these years later, it somewhat reads as cynical, the way that they were like, let's do an Indiana Jones sequel, let's do a Ghostbusters sequel. We're always doing like Beetlejuice. I haven't watched it. I don't know if it's good, but it's cynical feeling to bring back Beetlejuice all these years later, and all the actors, and they're all old now. Wow, like that whole approach to stuff is exhausting. Disney remakes, and I'm not going to watch any of them ever. I don't think these live action Disney remakes. So there's that cynicism is kind of here with bringing back Doctor and Donna, but it's a fun sci-fi show. Let's roll with it, even though they're kind of cynically, but like being like, here's the beloved showrunner, here's the beloved actor, here's the season people like, we're gonna bring them back. That stuff's weird, but it's David Tennant is Russell T Davies is taking this chance to specifically walk back a horrible fate that Donna had, which is doing a thing in itself, and also foreground the queerness that he's going to be spending more and more time with going forward in the show. So that is a victory there. That's fun. This has been a very, I'm going to have criticisms going forward, but this is an era of Doctor Who that was just really cool to be like queer positive and everything. Specifically, given that like not so long ago they were doing the weird Harry Potter cameo where you're like, what do you mean by that? And like how gross so much stuff is. Having this show be countercultural in a way, with how it's like actually being in favor of this stuff in an era where it's not popular to be in favor of this stuff. I don't know if you want to call it rainbow capitalism or what, but like that's just, it is art that I think is helpful on some level for doing this. So that's all neat. The second special is probably the best one. It's this crazy space station, not really a space. Is it space station in space? It's a deep space station. My brain thinks of space stations as being in orbit, and this is like out of the universe, but whatever. It's a cool sci-fi concept. It's got creepy visuals. I liked this is the one where Doctor and Donna are split up, but they think that they're with the other one because they're being impersonated, and the slow creeping horror of realizing that these are not asynchronous scenes but happening at the same time, and each one of the Doctors and one of the Donnas is fake and so on, it's cool. There's a lot of satisfying setup and payoff and ticking clock things going on in this episode in a way that's very, very Doctor Who, and is often very fun to do. You often need these kind of like mechanics in these narratives because of how the Doctor is non-violent or tries to be. And you often want to have these episode spanning clever bits to make the show fun, so it doesn't feel like the Doctor just like waves his hand and magically solves a problem. So this was a cool episode, but what this episode did is that there's a part where they trick these creatures at the edge of the world with something, and I believe that moment, because of the context of where this is happening, introduces magic into the world functionally, and from here on out, Doctor Who is going to be a show with magic and gods and deities and fairies and other stuff. And I don't love that turn, in part because it means that stuff just makes less sense in many cases. Like, if it was magic that is internally consistent logic, or magic that doesn't, like, cheat the plot, then it can be fine. I'm not anti-magic, but I feel like going forward, this approach, introducing these elements, makes it really hard to have concrete stakes in episodes or satisfying conclusions to them, and that's going to be a thing that spirals forward. But the episode itself is pretty solid. The third special is the Neil Patrick Harris special. Neil Patrick Harris is like the toy maker or whatever, some kind of ancient classic Doctor Who villain that's returning, which is a recurring thing that happens in this era. So it's a decades-old character being brought back, played by Neil Patrick Harris, and this episode does two main things: the trial and Regeneration. The trial is super interesting because it specifically puts the Doctor on trial for what has happened to the companions since Donna. At this point, Donna's already been rehashed and saved and so on, so it's not really worth going through this and all. But when you go through the companions, Rose Tyler got locked in an alternate universe where she can never return. And then Martha turned out okay, if I remember correctly, but she did have to single-handedly save the world without the Doctor, which is a horrible, stressful thing to put her through for like a year or whatever it was. So she wanted out. She retired, basically. Although I think she then joined Torchwood, but I never watched Torchwood. Then Donna had her thing where I talked about with her memory, which was tragic and sad. But they kind of got worse going forward. Amy and Rory were the companions next, and they got permanently locked in the past by Weeping Angels, which is like a kind of death, but not really the way that Weeping Angels always work. They were kind of like sent to have their own life that is like a fixed point in time and can't be saved by the Doctor, displaced in time, but together. So they're together, which is like kind of like the Rose being locked in an alternate universe with that other clone of the Doctor, which itself was a bit silly. So Amy and Rory get off maybe the easiest. Clara dies and then is like revived, frozen in the last second of her life like a time zombie, and then she gets her own like 50s diner where she travels with another immortal character, and she kind of gets to be another Doctor Who, kind of somewhere off in the horizon. She's just up to shit in the last second of her life, trapped. It's like and then Bill got shot through the heart. Bill got super murdered horribly, then transformed into a Cyberman, and then got sucked into like she's now on like lesbian puddle adventures, so she kind of gets a happy ending but she's also like changed forever and also kind of dead. You can see how these are messy, like these are a huge mess. And so what happens here is Neil Patrick Harris, his puppet master, his toy master guy, is his little puppets out, and he's taunting, he's puppeteering each of the previous companions and talking about what their fate was and the horrible thing that led to them, the horrible thing that happened to each of them. And then David Tennant, as the 10th and now 14th Doctor, I guess, is explaining away each bad fate the way that I just did, like, oh, but this happened, and she's doing this now, and so on. And Neil Patrick Harris responds in an incredible way, because these excuses feel feeble for the cruelties that happen to these characters. And each time that he says the cruelty that happened, and then David Tennant says the excuse or the thing that he tells himself to be okay with it, Neil Patrick Harris says, "Well, that's all right then." And it's extra funny because it's not even the accent he's speaking in. He's speaking in like, I think like a cartoonish German accent the whole time, but he keeps saying that part so clearly and sarcastically. And every time that he says another companion and what happened to them, and David Tennant's excuses get more feeble sounding, and the "well, that's all right then" gets more sarcastic and loud sounding. And it's like such an indictment on the last era of Doctor Who, admittedly skipping the entire Chibnall era and ignoring it and just talking about Stephen Moffat's era. But it's like, it's addressing what happened to these companions specifically as a judgment, while in the context of having just saved Donna. And you're like, okay, this is a realignment of this show. They're realigning their ideology of, or how their philosophy for how they deal with these characters, and that's super interesting. They're like, we don't want to have these characters that have these horrible, because part of the thing here is that there's like, if your adventures with the Doctor are so incredible, how do you say goodbye to it? How do you ever leave it? Like, how do you get a character to leave? And they keep having to invent tragedies in order to do that. And that's just not necessarily the case. People have lives, even if these adventures are really cool. They have people they care about, and if you introduce that context, they have a reason to go home and not to just be adventuring forever. So it's interesting to like kind of forefront this new philosophy of how we're not going to be killing companions or having them have these horrible fates going forward. Hopefully, maybe, we'll see. But that seems to be the approach that they're like. That's like the mission statement for Russell T Davies going forward here, is to make a somewhat kinder show. Okay, sure. Then the Toy Master fatally wounds David Tennant, I think, and he then does something that no one expected, I don't think, which is he bi-generates, which is not a thing that existed before. Instead of regenerating into a new Doctor the normal way, because we all expect him to turn into Ncuti Gatwa, the next Doctor, because you always know the casting in advance when this stuff's happening. It's just not really hideable. He splits in half like an amoeba, and they even both look at each other while they're still having the same torso, the same legs as each other, and before they finish splitting, and they just become two people. They're even both wearing half of his overall costume. So they literally split each half their clothes. I think like Ncuti Gatwa was wearing like a button up and underwear, and Tennant's wearing like the jacket but without the button up under it or something, and he's wearing like slacks, like it's, you know, like they're wearing parts of the clothes. And like, interesting, sure. And then the 15th Doctor just splits the TARDIS in half too, so they both have TARDISes. Sure. I feel like you didn't need to give them both TARDISes. But what they're going to do here is they're going to have David Tennant, who they keep bringing back. There are so many David Tennant clones at this point, and him breaking the rules a bit. He was already in the 50th anniversary special with Matt Smith, if I remember correctly. And he also has a copy of him that's in the Rose Tyler universe. And now here, he gets to live on. He not only came back after Doctor 13, which is another rule break, but now, just to keep precious David Tennant around, he now exists independently of the Doctor. So Ncuti Gatwa was Doctor 15. He's the new Doctor, but David Tennant is also there as like a Doctor, I guess. He's over there. He's gonna just go like retire and have a life with Donna's family and settle down, I guess, which is interesting. It's an interesting farewell to David Tennant as a separate entity. Cynically, it does somewhat open the back door to the idea of just bringing David Tennant back whenever you want to, which is a thing that is a dangerous thing to give the Doctor. I would like to see Doctors interact with each other more. I'd be cool with that, even though it like breaks the timeline and it's like weird about like him interacting with his own history and so on. Like that's obviously messy, but it's fun. It's so I'm okay with it for that reason. I don't really care if it makes that much sense. I do feel like it somewhat delegitimizes the new Doctor in a way that I find, like, I worry that like reactionary weirdos now have an open door to like just call David Tennant the real Doctor and this one the fake one, because they split off, and there's like, the show is treating this new Doctor as the real Doctor and that we're following them, but you could reject that and be like, no, the one we're not following, that's the true Doctor, we're following an imposter now. And like that, it's kind of like, it makes things messy. But maybe David Tennant comes back in the upcoming specials after Ncuti Gatwa's era and has some fun with Rose Tyler or something. I don't know what they're gonna do. But But then the Gatwa era properly begins. We get 2 seasons, and only 2 seasons with this Doctor, which is rough. One, because the seasons used to be 13 episodes long. Then during Peter Capaldi's era, they became 12 episodes long. And then during Chibnall's era, I believe they became 10 episodes long. And now during the Disney era, they are 8 episodes long. So the seasons are shorter than ever. So both seasons combined of this Doctor are just barely longer than the entire Christopher Eccleston season, who was previously the Doctor from the new era we had the least time with. He lasted 1 season. He supposedly, I think he like objected to how some staff were being treated on the set or so on, and like didn't want to do the show anymore or something like that, like a kind of labor dispute type thing, that's cool of him if he was standing up for people. He's oftentimes my favorite Doctor to look back on, so the fact we only got 1 season is a bit sad, like in whatever context. I think I'd probably cave and say David Tennant's my favorite if we had to, but the part of me that's a contrarian is always ready to praise the Christopher Eccleston first season, because I like his intensity, and I like that he has a funny face, so he can be really goofy and really intense and like play a more complex character in the time given in a way that I find really interesting. But yeah, so we're this is me doing way too much preamble before we can finally get to the 2 seasons of the Gay Doctor, which was not enough. I was very sad. I did not know he was leaving the show, and only in the middle of watching the finale did I realize, like, oh, there are signposts happening here. There are flags. There are like death flags here, and like signs that this is like a big hurrah for him when he's about to leave the show. I think this is his last episode. Oh no. So I only realized during the finale that he was probably leaving the show, and then he left the show, and I'm like, all right, so that's it. I guess I can talk about this as instead of individual seasons, I can talk about this as like an era of Doctor Who now, which is the Gay Doctor era, the Gatwa era. And it's unfortunately a real mixed bag. Psych, there's a 4th special. This is stupid. It's immediately they kind of fumbled the entire introduction of this whole thing. They introduce the new Doctor and his companion Ruby Sunday in a special, the 4th special, and then they launch the show, and it has season 1, and it starts with Space Babies, the episode after their introduction. So it's like immediately the show is impenetrable because it's supposed to be a soft reboot. They're calling it season 1 again. It's like Disney's involved and whatnot. It's so confusing to have the season start on Space Babies, which is just like a random episode. That's like, I mean, it's episode 2, because the special was its own thing. So they didn't put it in the season. If you watch the show now, they've realized their mistake and they put the special in the season. So thankfully, the special is now episode 1 of the season, and it shows up as a 9-episode season when it's not. So at least there's that, because otherwise they were trying to introduce people to the show as if it was a starting point. Like you could just hop on here, and you could skip all those previous specials that did all that table setting and just watch the show from scratch here, supposedly. But they accidentally made the jumping on point Space Babies and not The Church of Ruby Road, the episode that actually introduces this Doctor and Ruby Sunday, his companion, and actually sets the stage for the season. Just super weird behavior. Just very strange they would do that. But also, if the intention is to make this a jumping on point, I feel like they've largely squandered that, because they also keep simultaneously obsessing over long-term fan service for dedicated fans that theorize about details that even I don't understand. So the season 1 finale is about a death god that's been clinging to the TARDIS for just like decades at this point. And like for decades for us, I mean, like since the old show. And the season 2 finale is about a returning villain who I did check out some of the episodes of from back in the day, or some of the clips of them. Was a cool villain, but is a weird thing to bring back this much later for a confused audience that you thought they were watching a reboot type thing where they could start here. Very strange. So the Church of Ruby Sunday, beginning of this new season, Ruby is an orphan, and given the past episode, what they did with the table setting, they're like, she's an orphan, and we're not going to kill her or metaphorically kill her. So it's like we're promising to be kinder to the companions, seemingly. They have to chase after like goblins who are flying a sky ship who kidnap and eat babies, and there's a musical number, and they just roll with it. So immediately there's a particular charming style to this particular season. It's a fun introduction. It's energetic. It has a lot in common with a lot of this new era where I have an all right time watching it the first time, but I don't really want to revisit it. It's not that particularly interesting in the long term. When that goes especially double for Space Babies, which is just like, it's just a bunch of babies on a ship. They have like what are basically like wheelchairs that are powered that move them around, and they've like created a monster with their fear and imaginations, and there's like a lot of like kind of muddied logic of whether or not we're supposed to care about the monster or worry about it as a life form and so on. And like the morality by the end was just kind of strange in that episode. Odd. Third episode, The Devil's Court, has a drag queen as the villain, as like a super powerful music deity. And this is getting into what we've been kind of unpacking ever since they kind of rewrote the world a bit and started having to deal with these weird gods. Is that I don't remember if the Toymaster counted, but this might be the first of like these strange creatures. This is a music god, and like this episode definitely shapes up to be the most interesting one so far, and like it seems like it's going to be Doctor Who reaching its stride for this era, because like, oh, the setup's strong, which is really important. Sorry, maybe I've rambled for so long that I get to this part and I'm tired already. So they visit Abbey Road when the Beatles would be recording there, and they're so excited to go around and see all these famous musicians doing their thing, and you see the Beatles and other performers, and they're garbage. They're awful, and you're like, what's wrong with you? He's like, I have a dog, my dog's name's Spot. He's just like singing dumb nursery rhymes. Like it's just a mess. And you were like, what's going on with the show? What's going on with these characters? What happened to Abbey Road? What happened to music? And it seems like no one really knows music, and everyone's kind of moving on, doesn't care about music. Everyone in the Beatles is getting ready to retire and just move on because who cares? And like, that's weird. What's going on here? And it's because this music god, somewhat strangely, is I guess greedy about music and wants to like eat it all up and not let anyone have music or something, and it's going to lead to the end of the world somehow. But like the fact that the Doctor's actually afraid of this god is interesting. That it kind of like he kind of sells it with the drama, and just this introduction to people, like the bait and switch of being like, we're gonna do the music stuff, and like, oh, no one can do music, is like an interesting start. It's a very strange episode that one gets resolved by somebody just landing on the right chord to play on a piano, but also like it's guilty of forefronting the season-long storyline too much, in that every episode of the season, or most episodes of the season, Ruby makes it snow. And there's a mystery there. Ruby's trying to find out who her parents are, her biological parents, and sometimes it snows around her. So there's this mysterious idea that something's up with Ruby, and that's a thing that's happened plenty of times, with like the crack in the wall with Amy Pond, or Rose with Bad Wolf and everything. So like this stuff has all happened before. So something's up with Ruby is not unusual by the standards of the show. You expect to have like a reference or hint to it every other episode, and then at the end we'll deal with it in some way. This one specifically has the maestro, the villain, is like in the process of attacking Ruby, but then getting entranced by the weird mystery of her parentage, or what her secret is and what's going on there, and that becomes instrumental to kind of surviving the episode. And that's just kind of annoying, just because it's building up more and more this mystery that, by the standards of the show, I can predict is probably not going to be that interestingly paid off. So it's just kind of distracting to have in the episode. But overall, a lot of these episodes just kind of have not very satisfying conclusions. I don't have a lot to say about this one specifically because I kind of am not remembering these first 3 episodes because I've not been rewatching them because they don't really stand out to me. The next 3 episodes, though, are great. We get 3 really good episodes in a row in a way that gets me really excited about Doctor Who in this era, and also just makes me perfectly happy with the quality of the entire season. Like, if the 9 episodes have a bunch of middling whatever, 1 or 2 bad episodes, and then 3 great episodes, then that's honestly like a good season by my standards for Doctor Who. Like, that's lucky. We immediately have Boom in episode 4, which is Stephen Moffat returning as a writer and creating a high stakes, little fun, little ship in a bottle scenario. I am going to go on to criticize later episodes for seemingly just taking place in like one room and trying to milk drama from that. I want to make it clear, I actually really like that kind of narrative. I just think that they're not done very well in some of these other episodes. But Boom is literally like the cast, the Doctor and his companion just walk out into a battlefield from the TARDIS, and the Doctor steps on a landmine, and like they don't really know what's going on yet. At first, it's kind of the recklessness of a lot of Doctor Who is that you'll have episodes that are kind of enabled by the fact that they just kind of like show up places and how badly that can go. The Doctor steps on a landmine, which is a wild way to set this up, and he's got this whole. It's very good at having building drama. You have the meter on the landmine. It's a weird mine that like shows the rate at which it's going to go off and so on. Basically, he almost sets it off when he steps on it, but he's able to stand still enough and balance perfectly enough that it's uncertain of whether or not it's supposed to explode. Essentially, it's a bit goofy, but it's like for the purpose of the drama, it's fun. There's a ring of lights around it filling up that isn't quite full. And basically, any kind of mistakes or raised stakes or chaos in this episode can all make the situation worse and closer and closer and agonizingly closer to becoming a problem right here. Got it. This itch. Oh, yep, that's a hair. That's why. There was a hair on my face. So it's a fantastic episode. It gets a lot out of very little building drama of what's going on. I just have a lot of fun with it, and I've shown a few people it before. Next up is 73 Yards, an episode where the Doctor vanishes, which does mean that we have an increasing amount of episodes that the Doctor is almost not in. Like, in both of these seasons, he's kind of not in one of the episodes. So if you're trying to count how many episodes he's in compared to Eccleston, it's an even lower number, kind of. It's kind of rough. But it's a very solid episode because we trap Ruby in a lifetime of being abandoned by the Doctor, but also she's being haunted. And this thing that's following her and how she reacts to it, how other people react to it, is very compelling. I particularly love that, like, she walks into this old pub and it feels like, oh, this is the cast for the episode, for this haunting episode. We're all going to be stuck in this building, and these characters are the cast for the haunting episode. And then they make fun of her, basically, and, like, they... instead of becoming the location of the episode, it's just another place she moves on from, basically, but they do, like... they build up this big gag and paid off really well, and it's a lot of fun with those characters. And we see like how she deals with like aging and progressing forward, both with not knowing what happened to the Doctor and not knowing how to stop this problem or what it's for or why it's happening. And she ultimately kind of uses it to stop a fascism, which is fascinating. She ends up using this curse to topple a fascist candidate from taking over in the UK, which is kind of a neat thing to have happen. But ultimately, yeah, she assigns herself a purpose for it and finds purpose in it. Still doesn't go away. It doesn't resolve. The way it loops around is upsetting, and the way that kind of like isolates itself back out of existence. Like she kind of like managed to save herself from this happening to her and essentially undo it. It's kind of upsetting because you have that thing of like losing a lifetime of yourself, which is a thing that like another episode I liked dealt with, which was the I think it was called the Red Waterfall episode or whatever. It's the one where Amy Pond gets stuck in a out of time hospital, like out of synchronous time, and she ends up being trapped there for ages and ages, and so she's trapped there for ages, and she ages is what I mean to say. And when Rory and the Doctor are going to save her by undoing this and making it so she doesn't have to spend all this time here, she's upset by that idea because you'd be kind of killing her. You'd be undoing the life that she's had, which hasn't been a great life. She's been fighting for her life in this facility the whole time, in like a post-apocalypse kind of vibe. But she did experience all that, and it matters to her. And so like the idea of undoing that, there is a weight there. So in that context, like even Ruby Sunday undoing this lifetime that kind of went wrong is itself like upsetting. But it's a very fun episode, a lot of fun. And then next up is Dot and Bubble, which is their like Doctor Who does Black Mirror, and it threatens to feel irritating and exhausting, like old, like it's an old man writing an episode about technology, and so you're ready for it to be out of touch and frustrating. And maybe it is. Maybe people don't like this episode because I hear a lot of people that also speak very negatively about Black Mirror, and it's like phones are bad and so on, and not really like. And I'm not always entirely sure how much I should think that people are being dismissive of the theming and what the show's actually doing to get a snarky tweet off, or whether I might be wrong and maybe the show is kind of trite and kind of poorly done. And given that Black Mirror is an anthology, both can be true. There are good bad episodes and bad episodes, obviously, and they might be fixating on worse episodes. I don't know. I'm a little insecure about my love of Black Mirror sometimes because of how negatively sometimes people that I respect seem to talk about it. So I'm kind of mixed on that stuff, which might be why I didn't commit hard enough to finishing my video essay from like 2 years ago about it, because I was like unsure with my own confidence presenting it in front of an audience maybe. But here in Dot and Bubble, you have this whole moon colony where everybody is kind of constantly in a state of virtual / augmented reality. So everybody has a screen in front of their face at all times, and they make that work by just being told where to walk. So they are remotely piloted by the walking controls, and they just like stay plugged in and keep interacting with social media and keep doing whatever they want to do, and just constantly are in their bubble. Like it's not that subtle of a metaphor. They're constantly in a bubble that's around their head of these like holograms, and they're just kind of following whatever impulse they have at any given time. This makes them relatively selfish because they can filter in and out any experiences or people that they want. So they very much follow whatever particular emotion they want and their urges and so on. And it makes them a bit unempathetic and a bit frustrating to deal with, because they'll just block out anybody that they don't want to deal with. But there is an alien creature that is devouring them one by one. And it's just like these giant slugs that just come right up to them and eat them because they don't see them coming. And this sounds like an out of touch, irritating way of handling technology. I get it. But for me, it's just like the drama is very fun. The protagonist of this, I like these episodes that are like Blink, the Weeping Angel episode, where you focus on a different protagonist that isn't the doctor or the companion, and they're either on the periphery or gone. And this is very Blink, because Blink was the episode where the Weeping Angels are happening, and the characters of that episode are finding videotapes of David Tennant that communicate what to do, and he knows what to do because he knows what happened already. So he's just saying the right stuff to the recorded videotape, and then they're watching it, and it's all working out despite that being insane to think about. In this one, they're trying to patch in through the bubbles like internet to talk to the protagonist of the story and try to break through and like get her to safety, but they have to get her to believe the threat is real. They have to get her to take them seriously, and like they don't, and like she doesn't respond well to them, and she's an awful person, but they care about saving her life and so on. And just that whole them navigating her as the primary antagonist essentially in order to save her is a very entertaining episode to watch through. And then mixing that in with like the crazy lore of the episode, like the way that people talk, they talk in such a specific way, because it's a planet entirely of young people in this specific context. So it's like they have their own little culture and their own little like phrases and everything, which is entertaining. There's building going on there. You find out that they can't walk without the bubble because they've been using it so much that they genuinely, like, it's like trying to write with your left hand if you're right-handed. Like they're so bad at walking without the bubble because they've been doing it for so long that they genuinely struggle to navigate around things, which is a problem because the instructions are basically just telling them to get eaten. Like it's just walking them into the creatures. There's just fun there. They get a lot out of the premise, and the conclusion is really upsetting, which is that like she was willing to put up with them in this while the scenario is playing out, but this is a class of people that see themselves as superior. And she's like, yeah, of course you guys helped me. That's the correct way of doing things. Like, that's just how life is because I'm so important and big deal. And everyone from this whole planet thinks that they're like a different class of people. And it was one thing on the overall, it was one thing on the web video, but like now that they're in person, it's unacceptable that they would interact. Like, it's like they'd be soiled by that. It's like, that's, oof. And it's like, and it's easy to read a racism thing into that because of the fact that the doctor is black now. And her reacting this way to seeing him in person and being this distant, it's like, woof. Like it's like he literally has a magic box where he can save everyone, and everyone's going to essentially sail off into the wilderness and probably die out of spite, essentially, because they're so above accepting this reaction, this help from the doctor, and his reaction is so good here. Like, it's just such a brutal, cathartic yell of, like, realizing that he's lost. Realizing that he could never save these people from themselves because of this. It's just it's like a raw moment to end the episode on. It's just, I really like this episode for all of that. It's also, like, the most earned cry. There's a bit of a thing where the doctor cries every episode in this iteration, and it's like, on one hand, having male characters cry on camera is good and should be more common in role models and so on, because we have like toxic shit to unpack about how men are expected to suppress their emotions and how that comes out poorly in other ways. So having him cry and that be a regular thing is good, but it's a little unearned how often it happens, and moments like this, where it's like moments like this are so strong. And there's some other episodes where it's like, oh, he's crying again. Okay, he doesn't need to cry every single episode. At some point, it's a little much. From here on out, the show drops in quality, and I have to admit, for me, never recovers. Not just for the season, but for the rest of his run. And I'm like, no, we had such a good 3 episodes there. So next up is Rogue, and this is one of my least favorite types of episode, but it does have a gay kiss. It establishes a love interest for the doctor, who is a dude. it's a bit weird because they were just trying to kill each other, and then within seconds they have chemistry or something, and I'm like, this is a weird right turn. I felt like it went too fast as far as progressing the romance, but we do have a canonical male love interest for the male doctor. Not the first gay kiss, because he did kiss Jack all the way back in the first season of this thing, but this is like very much like a mutual thing. Like they dance together and then they kiss, and it's like it's unapologetic, and it's like committed. Like this is not implied, it's not innuendo, it's not left for interpretation. This is happening. It was a little weird just that it came and went so quickly, and like it was a bit underdeveloped because it's also busy doing what is, and this is what I was hinting at a second ago, my least favorite kind of episode of Doctor Who, which is that once a season we often have the bit where we go to like old English palace era something. I don't know the history for this that well, but it's like it's a bunch of people in fancy historic period piece clothing, and you know that they're probably half the reason why they do so many episodes in this style is because they have that stuff on hand, because there's so many shows and movies in England about these eras and so on. But it's usually like this or that princess or someone is like being attacked by living dolls or vampires or mermaids or something, you know, or the aristocracy themselves are the monsters and they're all secretly this alien or something. Each time it's like the same episode, basically. Like I feel like they always play out the same way. There's not really anything interesting going on with the monster usually, so it's just like, what prosthetics did they wear this time? This is just a whole subgenre of Doctor Who episodes that I don't really appreciate. There's like a dozen of these, I think, in the new era, and I just watched them once, move on, never watched again. So the main draw of this one is just the bounty hunter named Rogue, and it's interesting to establish some kind of relationship. Unfortunately, they immediately send Rogue to what's basically hell. And then he doesn't come back. And then he doesn't come back the next season, really. There's a small hint of him for a bit. And then this Doctor's era is over. So we don't get to follow his storyline with that character any longer because he's gone for over a season. And then that Doctor's gone. So it's like, will the next Doctor still be in love with Rogue? And what gender will the next Doctor be? Because we don't actually know yet. And how will that play out? I don't know. So it's just kind of like just kind of didn't go anywhere. And then we have the 2-part finale, The Legend of Ruby Sunday and Empire of Death. And this is the one where they reveal that this big Egyptian death god jackal thing has been clinging to the TARDIS invisibly for an incredibly long time, ever since he was supposedly defeated back in classic Doctor Who at some point. It's a really cool CG furry thing to see on that level. That was fun to watch, because that's always fun to see weird creatures and so on in that vein of things. But it's a 2-part finale where the first one is setting the stakes and the second one pays them off, and the first one is always like unfathomable evil and chaos, the world's exploding. And so we watch the entirety of Reality End, and then the next episode they fix it. And it's just like these storylines are always rough because they take so long, especially with their 2-parters, and the conclusion always just feels too small and too easy compared to the stakes. This one, I think they practically did like tug of war at one point with the monster, and you know, they're awkwardly interacting with the CG creature they can't really interact with. The payoff for Ruby Sunday's mystery is that she's no one and there's no special secret. It's just her own obsession with finding her own mom. That mystery being important to her was enough. Like the idea is some vague moral about how like little people are magical, basically, like everyone's important stuff, but it just wasn't very interesting. It'd be fine as a payoff if that just happened to be the storyline at the end of the stuff, but like it was just it's too hyped up in this part as if it's important to these storylines and becomes pivotal to solving the problem after having already been a bit too hyped up during the fight with Maestro. And also she keeps summoning snow somehow, and that's not really, I don't think, explained particularly either. And so it's just the fact that it's nothing, it's just kind of frustrating. But these are always frustrating. Like, Clara was split between the timeline of all of the doctors, and she's been like appearing and dying for every doctor all the time, and that's why she was Souffle Girl that one time, and so on. A lot of these are like insane conclusions. So I'm just used to conclusions of seasons not being good, so I wasn't that surprised. What was weird is that they handled Ruby leaving the show very strangely. I think it might be because the actress was originally expected to be on for longer, so they had to kind of just like pull removing her out of nowhere. But they're also doing the thing where they're not killing off companions, seemingly, as a mission statement. So Ruby finds out who her mom is and then becomes dedicated to that new life of spending time with her mom and figuring out her new thing and so on. And that's fine. It's kind, and it's a reasonable reason why she would leave. What's weird to me is that she and the doctor treat this as like a tearful farewell. Like she can't come back. Like they treat it like this is some huge barrier between them. It's just her having a life. Like, what? Clara had a boyfriend and was a teacher. Amy and Rory had a whole evolving relationship where they specifically did highlight the fact that, like, and this was interesting about their storyline, was that, like, they were moving on with their life. There's a part where the doctor shows up again and Amy and Rory are getting a divorce. And you're like, what happened while we were gone? They're having a whole life off camera and stuff. There's nothing about Ruby reconnecting with her mom that means she has to leave the TARDIS. Because the doctor can be like, oh yeah, I'll give you some space. And then, because he's the doctor, he could just skip a month or 3 months and just show up again in a few months and be like, hey, Ruby, how's it going? And see how things went, which is a perfect break for season 1 and finale season 2 start. It'd be like, oh, we check back in with Ruby a few months or years later and let her have her own life for a bit, but then she can come back on adventures. I know the point is for her to leave the show. I'm saying that in the text of the episode, it's just a really weird scene because they have a weird level of gravity placed on her leaving, but there isn't a narrative reason for her to leave. And she also, like, sometimes people have falling out with the doctor, like they don't trust him or they feel betrayed by him or something else happens there, or something too bad happens in an episode and they just don't want to do this anymore, maybe. There's stuff like that could be breaking points. But it's also like, it's just weird. It was a very weird scene at the end of the season. They cranked up the emotions too high because they were trying to serve the purpose of it being the farewell to the companion from our perspective and have the emotions there be high enough, but also didn't want to like maim her or doom her in some way. So nothing's actually happening to her that means she has to leave the TARDIS. And for the reason I just gave. So it's just a very weird scene. It's further undercut by the fact that she just does come back next season, just not as the companion, but she's in like 3 or 4 episodes. So she's just around. So it's like, it's just too much of a farewell. They were just too weird about it. They honestly could have, since we knew that she was going to go catch up with her family, what the correct thing to do, I think, was to not have a farewell between her and the doctor. Just don't do it. Instead, have the emotional scene of her reconnecting with her mom and then end on that. And the next season, the doctor is connecting with a new companion. Like, oh yeah, I guess, he's just moving on with his life and meeting other people and hanging out. And then Ruby shows up again later in the season. You're like, oh yeah, Ruby's still around. Then it'll be fine. They farewelled too close to the sun and made it weird is what they did. And that's the main thing I remember of the entire episode, because the actual plot of the 2-parter was just not very good. But then we get to season 2 of this season, the second half of this era. In between, we had a Christmas special. That one was kind of fun because they're in a hotel for time. So it's a Christmas hotel with time. So doors open both through time and space to different places, which leads to a time loop thing where the Doctor meets himself. He has a big conundrum with something, but then meets a version of himself that solved the problem, but then he gets abandoned by that version of himself and has to go the long way around. So he spends like a year, and like that's fun time travel stuff. There's a lot of this episode that was pretty fun shenanigans in general. It does end on the weird note of kind of killing a companion, though. When I thought that was what we're not doing here, is that the companion is back. Sorry, we have a 1 episode companion, and she kind of dies. She kind of like ascends in like a heavenly way, in a life-ending, altering way that she's never coming back, which is like a lot like a death. Just feels like a little bit of like out of step a little bit. I did mean to point out that when we're talking about the new philosophy for companions, it was worth noting that they specifically brought back the redheaded companion from back in the classic show. So before I started watching any of this, so while they were having the episode where David Tennant was on trial with the companions, they specifically brought back this old companion, and she's still around, same actress and everything, and just like implied the life she's been having ever since. And she shows up every now and then in these episodes, and she's just around now, just like how Ruby's going to just be around now. And like that approach to companions is fun. The idea that like they're just not currently adventuring in the TARDIS, but like they have their new life or their new values, and they're just doing other stuff for now, but they can just show up in an episode is fun. Obviously, actors are not always available for that. Like Amy Pond is played by the actress that plays Nebula in the Guardians of the Galaxy movies, and so like a lot of these actors they get busy. They're often chosen for what they're good at. Ncuti Gatwa played Eric, the gay best friend in Sex Education. I remember very much being surprised by that casting, because I was like, I would like to see the gay best friend. He seemed really young, so I don't know how this is going to go, but I guess it has been enough years since then that he just like does look visibly older in a way that I underappreciated at the time, because I don't remember what the last time was that I watched Sex Education. Very entertaining show. But yeah, I switched to season 2 on my screen here and saw the old companion that they brought back, and I was like, oh, I should mention her, right? Because that strengthened the thesis there. Is like they put David Tennant on the trial for the previous companions, and then they're specifically doing this before they introduce Ruby, but they're also they just redeemed Donna 2 episodes ago, and they're also currently bringing back a companion from decades ago and making her part of the current storyline, and so she just kind of comes and goes here and there. But then season 2 starts, and it's just kind of bad, unfortunately. We have Miss Belinda Chandra as a nurse as our new companion. Amusingly, I was watching Andor at the same time, and she's the same actress that plays one of the rebels in that, so there's a bit funny to see her in 2 different shows the same week, basically. Unfortunately, she's just not a very strong companion. She somewhat gets overshadowed by Ruby coming and going throughout this season, to the point where Ruby almost gets more screen time in the finale of the season, and also Ruby kind of gets her own episode this season. So Miss Belinda Chandra has less episodes in general, but also Belinda's introduction is like kind of weak. She's in this episode called The Robot Revolution, which gets dubbed the Planet of the Incels, because basically her ex-boyfriend, or even maybe a boyfriend somebody whom she might have just dated once even, that was scorned, became like the hive mind of a horrible like Borg civilization, basically, and she gets pulled there and ripped out of time and space to his benefit. And like this episode kind of weirdly ends with them murdering him in a way that seems against the Doctor's ethos, but it's also just not a very good episode. It has an okay setup, like many of these episodes do, but its conclusion is just too wobbly. It's like, it's too much like, it's the villain and the doctor in a room, and then he just kind of like does a somewhat magic answer that solves the thing. I don't know. I just didn't resonate with this episode. I didn't find it very entertaining or interesting throughout. Next episode was Lux, where he fights an animation. Really cool animation, like that. The stuff they're doing there with the animation with the retro animation and like in the cartoon coming to life is interesting. But I can't stress enough that once you get past the initial mystery stuff, it's just them walking up and down the steps of a theater over and over again, while evil animation slowly walks towards them. They walk up the steps, they walk back down the steps. They can't leave this one space. They just gotta keep going back and forth in this one room while this thing keeps menacing at them. And then they just like suddenly beat him. They fill him with light and he turns macro and becomes the universe. So his weakness was just light. If he just had light, he would disappear forever. I don't know what his plan was then, because like that's most of the universe is full of light. Just a strange, like, I just didn't vibe with that episode. It's every episode pretty much the season starts off promising and then just kind of gets rough at some point. It's fitting that I'm talking about them just kind of being in a room and not moving around very much. Because the third episode is called The Well, and this episode revisits somewhat. I was I got chills when I realized what they were doing. But then I was like, oh no, are they going to ruin it though? Because this episode revisits my favorite episode of Doctor Who, which is Midnight, an episode from the Donna season where Donna is not around. Like it's like an episode off for her. And it's just this really creepy ship in a bottle episode where they're stuck in this transport that gets trapped, and they get so much mileage out of the fact that they're just repeating what each other are saying, and the monster is like possessing them and so on. It's just such a cool episode about how to ratchet up tension and how to do like a whole screenplay that's just like in one room and so on, and really have it be compelling and interesting all the way through. I really love Midnight. It's a very entertaining episode. The Well is the same monster from Midnight. We still don't get to see it. There are creepy scenes where the doctor realizes that they're realizing that something is behind this person. Like, it'll be like they'll look away, then right when they look at this person, they'll see a shape behind them, but they don't get the chance to see what it is or make out what's going on. And they get really paranoid about the fact that there's something behind this person. So like with the repeating in Midnight, we have a weird rule going on, and that's entertaining from the get-go. The tension is very interesting here. But then it starts actually being a threat, and it just kind of awkwardly throws people across the room psychically or something, and that is very goofy looking, so it's kind of undercutting the tension a bit. But it's also just, by the end of the episode, I'm just like, stuff in this went well, but it's just not a successor to Midnight. It's not as good as the episode that it's being a sequel to, and I wish they hadn't touched the thing that I liked and muddied it up with it being not as good here. The next episode was the most interesting episode so far, which is It's Lucky Day. This one revisits the new philosophy with the companions, but drops it a bit. What happens is this one is focusing on Ruby Sunday again, and it's her life after the doctor, and she gets on a podcast talking about some of this stuff, but it turns out that like she gets on a podcast with this guy, and he's like dating her, and they seem close and everything. But then what ends up happening is that she gets baited into a horror scenario, and you think you know what's going on, but it turns out that it's him and his friends using costumes and tricks to trick her into thinking a horror thing is happening. Which one? That's the second episode in 2 seasons where Ruby is in like an old pub and gets tricked by people for a prank. So it's weird that happened twice already. I pointed out that it was what I liked about the previous season thing. But this is pretty interesting here because it's dealing with parasociality and like weird reactionary podcasts and the way that misinformation and lies are spread and how people like this are incentivized to use the attention economy for profit and so on. Like there's interesting stuff going on here, and it's unpacking the way that somebody like Ruby might become famous in certain circles for her interaction with a doctor, and how that can be used, that can become harmful in ways. So it's very interesting up front. But then the episode just devolves into scaring the villain straight, where they put the villain in the room with the monster, and a really long amount of this episode is just Ruby and the leader of, not Shield, what's it called? Unit? Just kind of scolding this guy and scaring him with the monster. And it goes on for too long because they seemingly just don't have anything else to do with this episode, and it seems to be like they don't have the budget to do more. So it just kind of stretches on for a while, their confrontation at unit headquarters, and it's just kind of tedious to watch, and it's like a little needlessly dark for the direction it puts the characters in, because they're like tormenting him, and they don't really long-term even scare him straight because he's going to be the villain later anyway, but it's just like not a satisfying conclusion to the episode. Like it's just one of the signs where I really started to zero in on how half or more of each of these episodes is just the villains and the heroes standing in a room and doing some drama at each other. But it's just not very, it doesn't capture why I like having ship in a bottle episodes or movies even that take place entirely in one location, like Reservoir Dogs and so on. Like it doesn't really get all the structure and drama you need to carry that kind of thing, and instead it just feels like they're killing time, and this is 3 episodes in a row where that kind of thing has kind of happened, and it's going to happen again because next up is the story in the engine. This is a barber shop in Africa where this story deity, because there's a lot of deities going on. There was the cartoon was a light deity. This is a story deity or something. He cuts your hair, and you have to tell a story while he's cutting your hair. And if you don't, bad thing happen. So it becomes a series of stories for people to tell. It's an interesting setup, and it's also the episode that's dealing with race here for the Doctor, because it's like, we know that this is specifically a place where he keeps visiting because it's a place where he feels safe and welcome, because he's been struggling on some level with his new appearance among the Earth people, because he spent so much time on Earth. He's treated differently for being black now, and this is a place where things are different, and that's comforting for him, and like that's all compelling. It's all setting up to be interesting, but then like it becomes just another wibbly wobbly mess of magic and strange resolutions and moving goalposts, and it just kind of fell apart for me. I don't really have, I'm kind of just rambling a month after I watched this season, so it's not the most concrete, well-written stuff. This is why I'm not writing like an episode about this necessarily, but like a lot of these episodes just kind of like turned into soup. Like they just kind of stop, they kind of just don't land anywhere compelling and kind of fall apart and just don't really stick the landing. So I keep wanting these old to materialize somewhere cool, and that doesn't necessarily happen. Interstellar Song Contest is functionally Belinda's final episode of having like agency and being involved in an episode. It's only 6 episodes in, because next is going to be the 2-part finale. They're at a song contest, and This one was weird. This is where the weird politics really get back in. Okay, so they're at a song contest, but terrorists show up basically, and there's a space bubble, so the membrane gets breached and everyone gets thrown into space except Belinda and a few other survivors. So she thinks she's trapped here and she's never going to see her family again because the doctor just got spaced. But the doctor is bullshit, so he survives and is able to do some nonsense to fly back at the space station using propulsion and so on. And so he's somewhere else in the space station, separated from her. But what's weird here is that in real life, this is clearly Eurovision, but this is clearly an analog for Eurovision. And in real life, the current controversy with Eurovision is obviously the genocide in Gaza. Like, Israel is genociding the Palestinian people, and various people were trying to insert protests of various kind into Eurovision, and there was a big clamping down on that where and like there's a big mess there of being like shut out or any kind of protests being silenced and so on, and a lot of controversy surrounding that entire event and the idea of having something like that happen at a time like this in this context and so on. So that makes it really rough that the villains of this storyline are a genocided people who then are doing a terrorism in protest of what happened to their people. And not only are they the villains of this episode, the doctor is, and I'm not entirely clear on what happened here. The doctor is pushed to such an extreme that he clearly crosses a line and does something dark here and tortures them. And that's a weird, dark turn to take with the doctor. It's weirder still that it's just like, yes, they did space everybody and then they have to save everyone and so on. So they could have killed a ton of people. So it's a really bad act, obviously. But like, there's been a lot of big villains in Doctor Who. This is a weird level of cruelty to see the doctor act against an individual, particularly one that he barely interacted with so far. And he's not a multi-episode villain. He's not the Master or some other person that is like somebody who really is all about pushing. It's like we have had the Master's job is basically to try to push the Doctor and make him break his code and so on, in a way similar to like the Joker does with Batman in like The Dark Knight, the unstoppable force meeting the immovable object and so on. There are characters who would potentially earn this moment of the Doctor breaking and compromising and doing something dark. Having it be this one-off character is weird, just narratively. Having it be the people who seem like an analog for the Palestinian people who are being genocided, that's a weird thing to do. That's weird to have that character be the one that pushes him over the edge, really relatively quickly too. That I don't love the subtext there. I don't love what that seems to say about real life and so on. It's also, there's a convenient other person from the same like alien species that was genocided who's there, and she's there to participate in the song contest, and she gets to then perform after all of this is solved, and she gives a big emotional performance, and it's like, oh wow, what a beautiful way to honor her people and so on. And the episode frames her like she's in the right and the terrorists are in the wrong, and it's like, yes, because they've written the episode this way, it was not especially productive for the terrorists to just kill everyone in a particular stadium that isn't necessarily even people who work for the company that is responsible for what happened to them. Like the target is strangely chosen, but that's also the writers doing that. They chose to frame it that way. It's weird to write an episode where there are freedom fighters basically, and then a feeble performance of protest, and the performance is right, and the people who actually fought for something are wrong. Like, that's a weird thing to do right now, in this era right now, saying that we should only do flaccid nothing protests and not actually in any way rise up against the people who are currently doing horrible, unspeakable things. That Doctor Who just didn't need to go there. I know that this is the like neoliberal mind poison thing, is that peaceful protest good, Martin Luther King good, Malcolm X bad, and so on. Like, that's always like the approach with this stuff. But it's like, it's just really weird. It's a really weird, and it's an uncomfortable conclusion to land on. They might not have had the opportunity to land on a different conclusion, but that's why you don't write the episode about what's happening right now. You didn't need to talk about this, is the problem. Woof. Okay, so for this 2-part finale of season 2, this is where things do get kind of interesting. It's also like kind of a strong finale, especially by my standards, where I talk about not liking these most of the time. I don't love the setup episode as much, but the payoff is better. But I think this is probably about time where I should be talking about the queerness of the Doctor a bit more, and how this is coming up and so on. Whew. This video is way too long to get where I've been going. Those of you that just want to have a bunch of background noise of me talking without there being a distracting video game in the way or whatever are winning right now. The me that wants to have an even vaguely marketable video that might bring anybody in is probably losing this week, but it's whatever. This is a weekly experiment. So I believe we were first introduced to Dr. 15 in the actual season of this storyline, as opposed to him splitting off from David Tennant and just being like, "Hi, yeah, I'm huge and great, and yeah, big personality, bye." It was about all we get from his first debut. I think one of the first things we see is he's a background character during Ruby's introduction, and at one point you see him dancing in a nightclub and just having a great time. Like this specific Doctor parties and has fun, and he wears different outfits and so on, and he wears like not outfits you expect someone to be wearing in a masculine role necessarily. I'm not a fashion person, so I genuinely can't identify what he's wearing sometimes, but I think sometimes he wears kilts or things that count as kilts, and I think other times he might be wearing a dress. But he's got a lot of fun outfits. There's a few times where they also go back in the past and he's wearing like a really nice suit and so on. I think his official uniform, or his like iconic action figure costume, is this one outfit where he's got an orange striped shirt and then a big light brown leather jacket over that. But he wears that, I think, in only like 3 or 4 episodes of the entire show. So it's like, it shows up enough to be his like kind of default, but I think fully the majority of the episodes he wears a unique outfit that he just wears for that one episode. And in particular in season 2, they keep calling out that he specifically likes to dress up, because part of his bonding with Belinda is that the two of them are excited to go off and put on a new outfit for the next episode each time, and they're having fun with that, and they're excited about that specifically. And they run off to like a certain door on the TARDIS, and they go change into a new outfit for every episode. So he really likes to just wear whatever. His presentation is a lot of fun there. A lot of like deep V's in his shirts or unbuttoned shirts. You get to see his chest a lot sticking out, which is fun. A lot of bright colors. He definitely always looks like he was he was put together by like a fashion designer or something. So that fashion forwardness kind of puts him in a different texture than other Doctors. Christopher Eccleston had a leather jacket and just kind of looked like a dude, just kind of had an appearance. But David Tennant had his striped suit. Matt Smith had his I think it was like a sport coat or whatever, but like everyone had a particular look, and they got increasingly quirky. Like Matt Smith, I remember David Tennant had his blue striped suit and he had sneakers. So that was contrasted a little bit, like the class of the parts of his clothing, because he's ready to run, because he always has to run from things. Matt Smith would toy around with his Stetsons and his fez and whatnot. But each one has their own particular look they land on. Particularly 10, 11, and 13 all have a particular like shared goofiness to their main outfit. Just a little quirky and a little colorful and a little bit of odd choices. Like it's a fun alien making particular choices and doesn't necessarily care what people think and so on. I don't remember what Eccleston... I don't remember what Capaldi looked like, but I think he looked more normal. Doctor Who Peter Capaldi main outfit. Is this a thing that I'll recognize if it... Oh yeah, no, he looked like a conductor, kind of. That's what my brain says when I see this anyway. So yeah, he just wore... He looked like he looked like a conductor, like, because he has his big mane of white hair up here, and then a black... Is it a suit? I don't know what it is. It just gives me the vibe of a music conductor. I don't know what to say about that. And its main highlight was just the fact that when he ran around, the coat would fly outward, and you'd see that the inside of it was red, and that was a cool little visual there. He's like partway vampire, partway like music conductor or for an orchestra. But I don't know clothes very well. But that's distinctly less quirky than the other ones. Ncuti Gatwa constantly toys around with... He honestly basically wears like a different doctor's outfit every episode. Like it's a new doctor worth of outfit every time, and that's a lot of fun there. So like that's a way that this plays into it. But obviously we have the trans character from David Tennant's little specials. She's still around here and there in some of the episodes involving Unit and so on. So we have a trans character around. We have the Doctor having a kind of boyfriend, so we're playing with that stuff. And that's how most of how I remember this kind of coming up in the first season. It just kind of hints at it. And his overall presentation, just the fact that we have a gay actor playing the Doctor, and he's just like living it up and just embracing that. He calls a lot of people sweetie and stuff like that. So it's just it's a lot of mannerisms and behavior, but it makes the show very fun to watch because you're just enjoying that dynamic here. And also very specifically, I don't think there is any chemistry, if I remember correctly, between the Doctor and Ruby romantically. I think they full on blow past that, and I think Ruby has a series of boyfriends in 73 Yards, the one where she has to live a life and so on, and then she also tries to date that one villain in the new season. So Ruby is romantically interested in people, but I don't think there's ever anything between her and the Doctor that I can remember. So it's just like that's all interesting to see play out and have that all play out the way that it did. So that bit of queerness is fun. I'm trying to just scan through to remember if anything else comes up, because it's mostly just vibes. It's mostly just performance, and every now and then they remind you of the love interest a little bit, but he's not an active presence, so it's not a super heavy thing that it's not a super obvious and constant thing that he's gay necessarily. It's kind of just a flamboyance, and that in particular is fun because it's kind of, I don't know for sure because I'm not English, or I think actually the actor might be Scottish, but I'm not from Europe, so I don't know the accents that well. To me, at least, it doesn't read as being like a stereotype or a caricature of gay people the way that sometimes it would be in American media. But given the difference of accents and culture, I don't know if I can judge that correctly. But it does just feel like someone being, iconic, just being very extra and being very extroverted and open and showy and having fun with it. And that itself is fun because the doctors have been goofy and sometimes they're a little showy. Like the midlife crisis Peter Capaldi we got when he had like the guitar and everything. And they obviously have their moments of like, I'm the Doctor, and then everyone runs away, but they're not necessarily having this kind of a great time all the time. So like this is a very different vibe overall. But I bring all this up because season 2, he's running around with Belinda, and once again, not any particular chemistry between them romantically. So it's once again like this platonic dynamic, and specifically Wish World, the first part of the 2-part finale, opens on Belindra and the Doctor being married, which is a bit of a shock for several reasons. Both the lack of chemistry between these characters and the fact that the Doctor is seemingly gay right now, and that's been like the point of all this. So like there's an immediate horror here. It's very interesting right out the gate. They're having a domestic life together, and they have a child, and it kind of has this like retro vibe to it. Like there's something about the aesthetically, it calls back to an earlier era also in a way that feels like they're being forced into a particular idea of a life. Like it gives me the vibe of like watching prologue sections of Fallout in like Fallout 4 or the Fallout show, where it's before the bombs drop and they're in that weird space. I know that's technically not the past, because Fallout's weird and Fallout takes place in the future, but like the past part of Fallout also was in the future because they had robots and everything, and it was like the future where the era that we associate with the past came back into vogue or something. I think it's weird. That's why there's the retro weird mix of like retro aesthetic and sci-fi robots in Fallout, I guess. But it looks like one of those settings that has that weird vibe there, and in particular, there will be moments where they something weird happens, something contradictory seems to happen, or there's a moment where they might be at the edge of questioning what their current situation is, because everyone just believes in what's happening right now. No one's questioning the idea that they're married, for example. But every now and then you have the edge of a doubt, and then there's just suddenly the visual of a broken coffee mug. There's just mugs keep breaking in these moments, and the first time it happens, it just feels like a storytelling trick you do with movies and whatnot to have that kind of thing happen to mirror the emotion. But then that keeps happening. That specific thing with the breaking mug keeps happening when these cracks are kind of forming in the world that they're in right now, and you're waiting for them to realize something's wrong, because you know, like, this isn't them, this isn't the life that they live, obviously. But the fact that it's being visually called out, the particular way that they signify that something's wrong, makes for a very compelling introduction. It turns out to just all be the secret plan of the evil bad guys, and that's really the secret plan part's not very interesting. The stakes, when they're like, ha 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 ha, all according to my plan, the world's exploding now, that stuff's not very interesting. The resolution of that stuff isn't necessarily very interesting either. Like, it turns out to be a super Time Lord mega skeleton which eats the villain, so the villain technically dies from just doing what they wanted to do in the first place. Their plan was just so bad that it kills them, which is an annoying thing that happens in Doctor Who sometimes. But it goes back around to being compelling because one, you have this like uptight looking, like buttoned up, like passing as straight Doctor, and specifically one of the mug cracking moments is when he makes the mistake of calling another man beautiful, and it specifically is explicitly homophobic. Like, they're like, this guy's upset by that reaction, and it's like, oh, queerness is the villain, is the queerness is out of place in this world. That's the upsetting subtext here of him just having a marriage and a baby all of a sudden, and us not knowing what's going on. Like, queerness can't exist in this state, and that is upsetting, because that's one of the defining traits of this doctor. And you have to, in order to understand the drama and the tension of the episode, you have to be in tune with what's going on there. And the big moment where the doctor does finally break free and start making his own choices and stop doing what this world is programming to do is punctuated by him transforming into a visually queer outfit. Like, he's got like this, like, I don't know what it is, like some kind of like sleeveless corduroy vest and skirt or something, and then little white sleeves sticking out and so on. It's just like, it's immediately obviously different from what he was being forced to wear a minute ago when he was blending in with everybody. And so they make his queerness itself the rebellion in the climax of an entire season of the show, when you're facing off against the big bad and everything. And it's like, it's such a cool way to handle some of this stuff. It's very interesting to specifically use his perceived straightness as like almost like a horror sting. You're like, what has happened here? This can't be him. What happened here? Why does he have a baby? But also, like, it's a very kind episode. This episode this world that wrung the queerness out of the world and the personality of these people and enforced all this, turns out to be the fantasy of the podcaster from a few episodes ago. He's been hooked up to this thing in a way where he's like, his fantasy is the fantasy. Like, he's controlling reality with his delusions, and choosing how it is, and that's why it's like this. So it does explicitly align these weird, right-leaning sounding reactionary podcast conspiracy types with just being homophobic, in that they remove queerness altogether. So that's a fun detail to pay attention to. And rebelling against him with queerness is a great detail. It's the but like it's a relatively kind episode, because when they're trying to fight back, they don't kill him or destroy him or anything. They specifically try to salvage him and wish for him to have happiness, which is like, compared to the way these people act, it's like that person being happy would fundamentally change them in such a way like they wouldn't be recognizable. They wouldn't be the person that obsesses over these things and would cause this in the first place. Like, so, but like the fact that they wish for kindness there is interesting. But most compelling is the fact that the doctor is willing to sacrifice himself for the baby. Like, he and Belinda have a baby together, and he refuses to let that baby go. I should know, by the way, that like the trans daughter from Donna's daughter just doesn't exist. Like, the moment they break the illusion and everyone's remembering what's going on, she just appears. And it's like, oh, that's interesting. One, it means you don't have to dead name and detransition this character for the sake of the storyline, which would be upsetting to deal with for a number of reasons. But it also lets them have the line where they just call out the fact that, like, in his fantasy, like, he didn't, like, he had no place for you. Like, he couldn't imagine you in his perfect world. Like, this character disappearing becomes framed as a failure of imagination for the guy that was controlling the universe. The fact that she just disappeared for a while, as opposed to the idea of just making the doctor straight, which is like what part of the audience wants. Like, and it's kind of a commentary on some of the audience, and on some level it's like, that's the conflict that they have with these people. Like, make the doctor straight, but also like they just would want to go just do away with her altogether, potentially, when you have these outlooks. So it's interesting to see that part play out the way that it does. But probably the most compelling thing that happened this entire season was this fucked up sequence where they've already won, they think, and you're like, what's going on here? Because half the episode is left, and they were just asking what was going on because Ruby could remember stuff when no one else could. Ruby could remember the real world as it was supposed to be throughout this thing, which is part of what I was talking about, where it says, when I say that this stuff keeps putting Ruby on the forefront instead of Belinda when it's supposed to be Belinda's season. Ruby has a bigger role to play in a lot of this finale. And part of it is her staging a small rebellion because she remembers the real world when even the Doctor doesn't. So something's up with her. And I think this is like, people have had their conclusion of why this happened because of what happened in the previous storylines. I don't know if it was because of 73 yards, or if it was because of something else, or the fact that she's just I think she just has previously remembered alternate timelines, so it's just like a thing that's just canon for her now. But when they remind us of that by having her ask about that, and then like kind of half theorizing about it. But then they're like, the Doctor and Belinda are figuring out what they're going to do with their kid and what kind of adventures they're going to go on. And the kid is in a crib next to them. And then the two of them are like, I think they're folding up a piece of clothing or something. And it keeps getting smaller and smaller. And their discussions keep getting more and more off topic until the point where they seemingly are referring to the wrong number of people. And then when Ruby brings up the baby, neither of them remember the baby. And it's like, I guess I didn't introduce this correctly. The Doctor went to great lengths to save this baby because the baby's like, the baby is this thing created by the fantasy. It's like in some ways not real, but he refuses to acknowledge the idea that it's not, that the baby's not real. And Belinda refuses to lose her baby because they care about this baby. It's a life. So they do some crazy isolation capsule shit with Belinda and the baby to try to help them survive the fantasy shattering, basically. And it seems to work, but here on the TARDIS, when they're celebrating, they're like folding up this piece of fabric and it's disappearing and getting smaller, and they're losing the topic, and suddenly they seem to not know the baby exists. And Ruby's right there alongside us as the audience surrogate to acknowledge the fact that the baby's disappeared and try to reason with them and try to get them to remember her. And it's gut-wrenching the way it plays out. Like, it's actually a really good scene to the point where it's the best drama of the entire season, I think. And they don't believe her, and it gets a little gaslighty and upsetting the way that they doubt her. But she does ultimately win through and convince them to do this, and the Doctor ends up self-sacrificing. The Doctor decides that he needs to realign the universe slightly to bring that child back into the timeline, and that's going to come at great personal cost. And so he has one of those like David Tennant sacrifices where he dooms himself to die just to save this one baby. And it's interesting. He visits Belinda afterwards, and she has the baby, and she's like, yeah, that's why I was always trying to get back home, remember? Because I had to get back for my baby. And so from her perspective, she's always had this baby. It's no longer the Doctor's baby. She's always had a baby. And from her perspective, getting back to this baby was her motivating goal the whole time when she was always stuck on the TARDIS and they were trying to get back this whole season. It just rewrites that bit, and now she's just happily living with a baby. And so he gets to just quietly exit this. It's not a Time Lord baby, it's a human baby. And he gets to have his farewell to everybody and have his outro. And it's like, it's a sad little emotional thing, but it's also like a very kind ending where like the way that this Doctor goes out is he's unabashedly queer. Being queer was a rebellion against the corrupting force of the world and was the answer to stopping it. And he also he won't let this like kind of imaginary person cease to be. He will sacrifice himself for this one life, and that's the ending of a storyline. Like, he regenerates, and he very confusingly regenerates into Rose from the first 3 seasons of the show, who notably is not one of the Doctors. That's interesting. I was curious what they would do after shooting Gatwa, and it's like the fact that he's turning it into. It's weird that he's turning into Rose. People think that Rose might just be who we have for the next few specials, maybe, and then the next season will actually be a different doctor or something. But I also wonder if it's like a second attempt at a female doctor after the first one was kind of a rough ride. I would say that this last season was a rough ride, so I'd be a little worried. But I was surprised, but maybe I should have expected the irony here, that like a season that I thought was the worst season, or a fairly bad season, just didn't have any episodes that really landed. The fact that it, one, gave me much to talk about, at least, and was interesting on that level, but also like the fact that it then had the strongest conclusion in a while, because the finales are usually pretty bad. That's interesting. It's not an amazing finale. I just think the villain kind of sucks. This was worsened by the fact that I checked out old clips of the villain to see some of her storylines, and they're bringing her back decades later, and she was interesting back in the day. So it's disappointing that they brought her back here, and she's kind of just not that interesting in the current iteration. Oh, right, I forgot to mention something. So in the middle of his regeneration, the 13th Doctor shows up. Not sure how that works, but it's Jodie Whittaker. She's back. Functionally the previous Doctor, since David Tennant barely counts because he just kind of came and went as himself again. And in the middle of this very queer episode, they specifically reconfirm a fan theory of sorts. I'm trying to remember what happened exactly, but I believe that over the course of the last season of Jodie Whittaker's run, they were kind of hinting that Yaz, the female Indian police officer companion, was falling for her. And I don't think that those feelings were being returned in a real way. And it kind of made that Doctor seem kind of oblivious or disinterested and so on. And it was unsure where that was going. And then, Flux happened, and that Doctor's run just kind of got wasted and ended, and we just had to move on, unfortunately. But in this moment, this Doctor is here to Dr. 13 is here to give some kind words to Dr. 15 and encourage him along in this big mess where he's reuniting the world and the stuff that he's going through. It lets them say farewell to each other and have some fun little goofy interactions. But in particular, the way that the Doctor talks about people he loves, Jodie Whittaker's then like, says that I should say that, and stuff like specifically calls out the idea that she might have feelings for Yaz, and she's like, I should say that to Yaz, and he's like, you never do, because he knows, because he's past it, and that's never what happens. It's like it acknowledges the sort of tragedy of the implications of what happened there, and it seemingly also reconfirms Jodie Whittaker as themselves being a queer character, which is interesting. This is like, it's not the same thing as J.K. Rowling being like, and then all this representation happened totally if you just ignore the text of my books. This is building on some subtext that was kind of there, but it just confirms it. And it does so with the actual actor and the actual character in the actual show. So it feels a bit more legitimate that it's just revisiting the character and actually confirming that that's what's going on. And that's in this context of like queer triumph and so on. It's not a very good episode, but it is really cool what the through line here is and what they're reinforcing here. So having her come in, not only is it nice to just see a previous Doctor again every time because they're all good actors and just they're nice to see even if their material's all bad. It was cool to see her again. It was cool to confirm that bit, and it was cool to just make the Doctor even gayer. I almost wonder if Russell T Davies is unsure if he'll get to keep the show or not, and he's just like, I'm just going to make this so fucking gay before you guys take it from me, I swear to God. Anyway, back to whatever I was talking about before I added this bit in, because I forgot to say this part. I'm sad to see the actor go. I enjoyed seeing him as the Doctor. I wanted him to have better material. I really enjoy those 3 middle episodes of the first season, so I'll be watching those for a while, I think. I'm not sure how much of this season I'll ever revisit, although I might just want to revisit this 2-part finale just to like see how they handled some of this stuff and maybe even unpack more of what they did, because I think there might be more going on under the hood that makes this stuff worthwhile. But overall, I'm fairly happy with there being a queer Doctor Who. I'm sad that they made him like an Israel apologist functionally right before the finale. It's a really unfortunate episode. I can't be the only one that sees that. Like, it's weird that they did that. But overall, it was a good era. I'm interested in seeing who comes next. I'm sad that he only lasted 9 episodes, if we don't count his first appearance at the end of the David Tennant episode. 2 8-episode seasons. Did I say 9 episodes? 18 episodes, right? 2 8-episode seasons, and then the 2 specials preceding each season. So 9. Yeah, so 18 episodes. But there was also 1 episode of each season that he was kind of less in. 73 Yards and Lucky Day are both Ruby-centric episodes where he's barely there. So 18 episodes maybe. But overall, that's only 5 more episodes than Eccleston got in his entire run of 1 season, because they were 13 episode seasons back then. I don't know. I like the show. I like that I currently like it more than I did with the last showrunner. So I do like Russell T Davies more than Chris Chibnall, but it's not necessarily recapturing the magic of the first Russell T Davies era, and I'm curious to see how it'll go going forward, and also what choices he'll make next, because at the very least he is making big choices that I think are cool, because they are about featuring certain stories and certain kinds of representation and getting his own voice through as a gay showrunner, and that is something that I enjoy. I enjoy knowing that there's that Doctor Who is being run by a gay man, and in this case was starring a gay man, and like that was a very cool experience to live through, even if a number of the episodes were rocky. And I'm sad poor Belinda just kind of got overshadowed, and also was just kind of like a weak showing throughout her season, because once again the actress seems fine. They always seem to cast people who are good in this. She wouldn't be an Andor if she was a bad actress, but just really just didn't necessarily stick the introduction of the character, and then never really got much else to go with there. I barely remember her being in Nurse Mattering. If anything, it was like an irony that in The Well she was being framed as a nurse, but then she didn't know how to do anything because the technology was so foreign to her. Either way, I've talked for way too long. My voice hurts, and I had other plans for today. I definitely thought this was going to be shorter than it was, but I've rambled for a million years. But so goes my 3rd channel once a week rambling experiment. Feel free to suggest topics in the comments or whatever. I don't know if I'll take suggested comments, but let me know what you thought about the season. I'm just kind of picking things from a list. I do keep adding things to a list. I was worried that I wouldn't always have stuff to talk about here, and I might run out of stories or whatever, but I do have a notepad document where I just add ideas, and I'm definitely adding them faster than I'm using them, so that's a good sign. Otherwise, I'll see you next week, and hopefully soon I have a video essay ready. I'm really trying to work on it. I ate up some of my time by accident here that I meant to spend on that, actually. Whoops. I better get back to that.